Thank you all for being here this evening for the classes. I know it's a requirement. Thank you all anyway. But welcome to the first of our Writers from the Ed series events, readings. And thank you to the community members and friends of the campus that made it out too. We appreciate you all being here. So yeah, give a round of applause for yourself. For those that don't know me, I'm Daniel Summerhill. I'm an assistant professor here in the H department of poetry and composition. And I'll be kind of doing the emceeing and introducing the amazing readers that we have here for tonight. That's Darius Simpson and Nayomi Munaweera. Again, you're in for a treat. Before I introduce the first reader, I just want to say a few thank yous to the folks that made this event and future events from Writers from the Edge possible. So that's the CAUSE, College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, HCOM, Humanities and Communications Department, Office of Inclusive Excellence, OC3, Bianca, who's running around making things happen. So, round of applause. So tonight's reading is going to be focused around social action and social justice and activism and what that looks like in terms of writing, right? And I think in today's climate, it's a very, very pressing and important conversation to be had. So we're going to hear from the two readers, and then get a chance to read the work, and then we're going to have some time at the end where they're going to be in conversation about some of the questions that I have, as well as some of the questions that you all may have as well. So save your questions, put them in your pocket, put a note on your phone, because you'll have time at the end to kind of converse with the authors. Yeah? Yeah. Awesome. So first up, we're going to have a reading by Nayomi Munaweera, and just a bit about Nayomi. So Nayomi's debut novel, Island of a Thousand Mirrors, was longlisted for the Man Asia Literary Prize, shortlisted for the Northern California Book Prize, and won the Commonwealth Prize for Asia. Her second novel, What Lies Between Us, won the Sri Lankan National Book Award. Yeah. About her work, the Huffington Post raved, visceral and incredible, devastatingly beautiful, reminiscent of the glorious writings of Louise Erdrich, Amy Tan, and Alice Walker, who also find ways to tell truth through their fiction. Munaweera lives in Oakland, where she's writing her third novel. Give it up, please, for Nayomi Munaweera.
Hi, Cal State Monterey Bay. Yes. Hi, thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Professor Umi for bringing me out. Professor Deb Busman, who is here somewhere, thank you so much. It's always exciting to be with students. It's always exciting to get to share work. Writers, we're a weird bunch, and we really pour our hearts into these works. My first book took me 10 years to write, and another 2 years to find a publisher, 12 years right here. The second one took 6 years. I'm working on the third. I'm hoping it takes a little shorter time, but we'll see. And I really think that the idea of social justice is something really close to my heart, because on one hand, I am an artist and putting together something beautiful, but I'm also really trying to get people to understand justice and what happens when all the rules are broken, and when people are placed in really dire, terrible circumstances. And as Daniel said, this is specifically a moment in our history, right, collectively, where we're really up against some, difficult circumstances. And I hope that all of you are galvanized and understand that this is an important moment in our collective history. Having said all of that, so my first book is, it's about the civil war that happened in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is a small island off the coast of India, but of course you all knew that, right? Just nod your heads. You knew that. From 1984 till 2009, for 26 years, we had this extremely brutal civil war between the majority race and the minority race. They're not really racist, although they think of themselves that way. They're more ethnicities, but for 26 years. So this is an extremely long, brutal, one of the most long-running ethnic conflicts in the world. So my first book is about that conflict. And when the idea came to me, I was like, oh God, no. Too much. It's too much, right? Like taking on telling that story. And then eventually I realized that I didn't have much of a choice. I actually dropped out of a PhD program to write that first book. And then eventually went on to do these like really amazing things, but early on I had no idea. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by reading a pretty difficult couple of pages. And a little bit of backstory, thank you. A little bit of backstory, 1983, 84, what happened in the capital Colombo, there were these race riots. So the two ethnicities are the Sinhalese, who are the majority, and the Tamils, that are the minority. You might have heard about this conflict. And in 84, there were race riots in Colombo, and 3,000 Tamil people were dragged out of their houses and killed. So that's the setting that my characters are in at this moment in the novel. If he could have entered the dead telephone lines that day, followed them across the burning city down to our aunt's quiet bungalow and into her bedroom, this is what we would have seen. As smoke rises over Gall Road, as muffled screams make their way over her gate, and although there are still 2 months to go, our pregnant Aunt Mama's belly is wrenching and twisting. It is the third day of 24-hour curfew, and her husband Anuradha, white-faced, fingernails bitten past her prick, has been watching his wife writhe for the past 2 days. He says, "The hospital, we have to go," and Mala gasping, "No, Anu, please, it's only the heat and the baby kicking." And he says, "All right, I'll go and bring the doctor here." But she cannot allow this. She has terrible visions of what could happen to him out there in the unseen nightmare beyond their gate. He carries her to their old yellow Volkswagen, the tight slippers dangling off her feet, and she worries about this, the impropriety of leaving the house in her house slippers. But then Poonam has pulled open the gate, and it is too late to ask for other, more appropriate shoes. They drive into the lane, a lull in the faraway shouting, the street festooned in sunlight and birdsong, foliage spilling everywhere, and for a moment there is normalcy. The sense that they are leaving the house for a walk along Gullface Green or Mount Lavinia Beach. They turn onto Gall Road and drive into thick, rolling smoke. Glimpse armed men, abandoned shops, looted cars. Mala, the aching of her womb momentarily shocked, still oppresses a knuckled hand against her mouth, and Anuradha whispers, "God," as the clearing smoke allows them to see. He is wrenching the wheel around homeward when the hand smacks, splay-fingered against the glass next to Mala's head. A teenage boy in a torn, stained school uniform. Behind him, the mob congeals, and the boy in his terror scrambles onto the hood of their car, and through the garnet smears on the windscreen, they see the glint of knives, broken bottles, machetes. The mob surrounds them now. And though she cannot see the men's eyes, Mala knows that they are expecting sacrifice, knows that this Tamil boy in his school uniform, his face squashed against the wall, so close to her own, the open fish mouth, the wide eyes, and that terrible gushing cut on his head has been chosen as sacrifice for years of deprivation, broken governmental promises, failed examinations, and decades of relenting physical labor. And the boy himself, knowing this, his hands raised to protect his delicate face, he does not even beg for mercy. She hears a door slam. She sees Anuradha push through the men, pull himself onto the car, his body in front of the boys, and she hears his words through her own shuddering sobs. "This child, he has done nothing. He is no problem for you." Her fingers struggle on the lock. She will jump out. They won't hurt a pregnant woman. There are greater human laws they will abide by. She is sure of it. And just outside her window, through the dirty glass, A machete is raised and hefted from hand to hand. She sees the silver gleam of it and sinks low in her seat. Anuradha negotiating, I can give you money, anything, just let me take this boy and go. The voices. What do you have to do with this Tamil bastard? These motherfuckers are ruining the country. They think they can take over. It's time to teach a lesson they won't forget. Crack some heads before they murder us in our beds. Move aside. Anuradha turns and wraps his arms around the covering boy. His eyes search for hers through the blood-stained glass, and she sees the blade raised and brought down, the flutter of his lids so familiar, his body jerking and then sagging as it has innumerable times over hers in the sanctity of their bed. But this time, it is the unnamed boy who receives his weight, who shrieks the ear-shattering screams of an animal in terror, more blood than she can imagine running onto the bright yellow paint of their car, and then 100 hands reaching out and pulling him and the screaming boy into their midst. She's huddled on the floor, arms wrapped around her belly when the door is eased open. A voice in Sinhala whispering, come, Nona, come with me. And she looks and sees Alvis, the coconut plucker, the slum denizen. Nona, come, let us go home now. And his calloused hands pull her onto the seat and then out of the car. The mob is gathered in front of the car, a blur of limbs and the metallic arc of weapons. But Alvis's sinewy, coconut-clasping arms will not let her break away and throw herself into the midst of the mob and beg for her lover's life. She is hurried away, and when the smoke clears for a moment, she struggles loose and looks back to see men on the upturned car like flies on a day-old fisherman's catch. White cans upturned, gushing gasoline, a roar as a spark ignites and catches and bursts into flames. The men's voices roaring and falling in time to the jumping flames, a jumping, dancing circle of men. Those on the periphery pushing forward, curious to see what the center holds. A louder shriek as a sarong catches a flying cinder and the circle scatters. And what is it that my aunt saw at that moment? Too grotesque to reveal, surely. Too horrific to be imagined. But in the name of veracity, it too must be told. Two vaguely human figures lurching in an almost comic fashion, garlanded each with a flaming tire. Hands bound, black rubber melting onto skin, red flames bouncing skyward, funnels of smoke obscuring wide open mouths, a glimpse of damaged eye. The swirl of men closes ranks. The scene is closed off from Mala's eyes, like a book of naughty illustrations slammed shut. So fast, she cannot accept what she has seen. A soft rain is falling, ash, settling into her hair and her skin, and at her ear a steady stream of words. She knows she must concentrate on this to avoid losing herself. She knows she must walk home now without allowing what is sheltering within her to pour out like water onto this smoky street. It's still hard to read that. Whew. I don't know if it was hard to hear, but it's still hard to read. Thank you. And I wanted to read that because I think that, you know, literature has a really important place in social justice. I think that there are ways in which people read a book and they become aware of a situation in a way that they had never known before. So I've had plenty of people write to me about this book, about all kinds of wars. I mean, people write about like World War II and they're like, my aunt was in Auschwitz and your book did something to me. So there's a way in which I'm connecting not just to Sri Lanka, but like really to like global conflict. And I want us to know that this happened in Sri Lanka. It is happening down the street, right? Like it is happening all the time. We have like kids in cages. Like this kind of violence is not far away. It's like right here. I'm gonna read something nice and fun now. And this is for Umi because he really likes this passage. And I thought I'd give you guys a little break before I traumatize you again. These are short, so bear with me. This is a very different voice, and this is a young girl who is growing up in the north of Sri Lanka in the war zone, and this is like the nice part before things get really messy. When she was young, before the war came, Amma was a dancer. She danced in all the halls and temples of the island, and even across the seas in India. And when she is in the mood, she tells us how she met Appa. He was a drummer, but old even then, she says, his beard already white. Now he is bowed and bent. His left leg drags behind him, and his fingers are always trembling like butterflies. But these are lucky things, Amma says, because these days, only the very old or the very young are not taken away into the war. On the evenings when the fighting sounds far away and there's no rumble of tanks or aircraft, Amma's students come shyly in twos and threes. A few small girls, they gather in rows, barefoot, under the spreading branches of our mango tree. I make sure that their muscles have not forgotten the stance, that their limbs are well stretched and pliant before Amma comes. I arrange their arms as she used to arrange mine, curl or clench their fingers to imply the blooming of the lotus or the ferocity of a warrior grasping his weapon. I push their shoulders downward so they must bounce from an even lower squat, their thigh muscles quivering and the sweat beading on their upper lips. When Amma comes, there is no music, only the rhythmic slap of her hands and her quiet voice calling out the steps. Sometimes there is the echo of faraway gunfire, but those sounds pull only at a small part of our attention. We are caught in the desire to please Amma, to perfect the placement of our feet on the earth, the tilt of our chins and the flash of our eyes. I dance so the girls can follow my feet, but so much more than that. I dance for the thrill of it. The way the movements flow through me like water pouring over my skin, the way my arms move through the air, winged creatures, and in these moments, swirling and stamping, arms extended, fingers curling and uncurling in the midst of the moment, I feel the air become very still, very quiet, as if all the attention in the world has descended into the small clearing in front of our house, as if Krishna with his flute and Lakshmi on her lion, perhaps even the Shiva Nataraj himself, drum in hand, foot poised in mid-stride, frozen in the midst of destruction, have descended to watch the magic in our limbs, our eyes, our fingers, as we dance under the mango tree. Another quick section, if I can find it. I don't know this book anymore. Who wrote this? Who did this? Strange. Sorry, I really have not looked at this book in a long time because I'm working on a third. I'm really strongly working on a third, like daily. So it is like, that's what's going on here. And I want to read this part because this book is also about immigration. It's all about migration. It's one of the families, I'm following two families. One of the families comes from Sri Lanka to Los Angeles, somewhat like I did. And the shock, right, of coming into a new land, of learning everything new again, and being completely displaced in time and space. And this is like a really difficult process that I don't think we even understand unless we've gone through it. And I know a lot of us have gone through that, and a lot of us haven't. So that discrepancy causes for a lot of tension. So I want to read this. It's very short, and it's really about what it means to come as a young person to this country. In these first years, we learn the lesson of our inadequacies. In school, we learn quickly that the smell of our bodies is shameful and must be dissipated by perfume or deodorant, that the hair on our legs, the fine down that we had never noticed before, must be shaved daily to smoothness. that certain kinds of clothes are acceptable, and these do not include the ones we have brought with us from the old country or those that Amma makes for us, no matter how painstakingly, on her old beaten sewing machine. We learned that acceptable clothes only come from stores, and for this reason we become good shoppers of the local bargain basements, the Salvation Armies and the Goodwills, looking for shirts, jeans, sweaters that will mark us as normal, as acceptable, and undistinguished in the crowd. We learned that hair conditioner comes in bottles and must be bought separately from cooking oil. We learned that although we have been speaking English from birth, people cannot understand the crispness of the Queen's English mixed effortlessly with the roundness of Sinhala in our mouths. We have sing-song accents, they say, a tendency to substitute V's when W's are called for and vice versa, so that veil, V-E-I-L, comes out sounding like a large C mammal. Various conversations are thus rendered incoherent. These are lessons about shame learned by watching eyes, by noticing the way other kids wrinkle their noses or pretend not to see us when we sit next to them at the lunch table or on the school bus. By careful observation, we realize that adaptation and emulation will be necessary if we are to survive in this new place. So quickly, very quickly, we learn to shed our old clothes, our old manners. We say cookie now, quite effortlessly, knowing that the word biscuit will be answered with blankness. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Naomi, one more time. So also, you have a chance to purchase both of Naomi's novels here in the back, so at the very end of tonight's reading, you'll have a chance to purchase them and then also get them signed too. So please send no books back to the bookstore. Buy them all. All right, so next up is Darius Simpson, and a bit about Darius. So Darius is a spoken word artist, writer, proud wearer of Crocs, poet, and social justice advocate from Akron, Ohio. He's the author of Conversion Theory and uses poetry as a tool with which he can heal, inform, and challenge his audience in their awareness of social, political, and economic oppression. Darius is featured as a protagonist in the film Finding the Gold Within, a documentary by Karina Epperline on what it means to be young black and male in America. He has appeared on a wide array of stages, and including ABC News, University of Akron's Black Male Summit, TEDx Detroit, and Pacifica Graduate Institute. His work has also been featured online via Huffington Post, Mike, Odyssey, World Star Hip Hop, and Button Poetry. Please give all of your love to Darius Simpson.
Black Panther was the hero we've been waiting for. America's greatest fear. A killer cop's worst nightmare. A black body that sends the bullets back at you. But we've seen that kind of resistance stamped out before. When the Black Panthers fashioned black power fists into trigger fingers, the United States government disarmed them, separated the organization at the joint, then buried the skeleton without a headstone. Me personally, I don't want to be invincible nor bulletproof. I feel like this place would get a kick out of finding new ways to kill me. But if you're asking, I want chips to be 50 cents again. I want my older brother's smile as a hand-me-down. I want criminal charges filed against the man who kidnapped my mother's laugh. I want a time machine so I can pull up on God just before she made light. So I can convince her that without light, darkness is just fine. I mean, can y'all imagine? Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And then there was darkness, period. And it lived as long as it wanted to. And all the skin inhabited by it was blessed by the sun. And the sun promised to never burn it. But even still, now being burned or having a dark anything was a compliment. And all the shadow children looked at each other on the playground and saw God staring back at them. Then after recess, they returned to a dim classroom where a teacher, of course, darker than them, taught them how their skin was a symphony and how self-love is the only song you need to pass life's exam. I want to see a black name on the internet and assume it graduated college before I assume it's been shot. I want to see a black face in a headline and assume it found a cure for cancer before I assume it went missing. I want to know why we allow officers to take lives but don't require they learn how to save them. I don't want to praise every time somebody black gets shot and so happens to live. I want an outrage anytime a bullet trespasses black skin. I want jail time for every single case. I said I want jail time for every single case. I want battery to be charged so often that the cop has to be 100% before unplugging the gun from the holster. Matter of fact, y'all can keep your indictment. I want the boy back. I want us both to die of natural causes. I want Trayvon to return from the corner store whistling. I want Emmett to return from the corner store whistling. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live in an all-black neighborhood on purpose. I want to like it. I want to look my family in the mirror at 75. I want to pull my grandchildren in from the cabinet corners in my reflection. I want to sit them down like crumbs in front of the stove. I want to sprinkle them with stories of my childhood, then let them marinate in all the lives I've lived until they are seasoned enough to pass on their own list of ingredients. I want black skin to do whatever it pleases without any explanation. I want us to breathe. Black folks, I said I want us to breathe without permission. Yeah, y'all. What's up? Can we clap it up one more time for all the folks, the names I do not know and departments I do not know, but the names I do know, Omi, Daniel, and Deb. Can we clap it up for them? And all the folks Yeah, as stated, my name is Darius Simpson from Ohio, not wearing Crocs. I want to clarify why I don't wear Crocs on stage, because every time it's in the bio, I'll be like, oh, but you didn't wear Crocs to the performance. You don't love Crocs that much. They don't look good. I love them, but if it's in a picture, they're not swaggy. So it's not. I know they're not cute, but I still love them. I stand for the card. We can talk about it after. Real quick, I want to try a weird thing that I've never done before. But introducing this book and these poems I'm about to do. I wonder if y'all can get in a group with the people that you're next to or around. So like a group of 4 or 5, maybe. Just like self-organize that real quick. Make sure that no one is alone. Even if they're trying to avoid eye contact, bring them into your group. Yeah. So in your group, I want you to, intros on that. Tight, so in your group, I want you to think about right now, as an individual and then as a collective group, what are you demanding? Really open question. What are you demanding? Now the caveat, so you have like 4 or 5 people, you have to whittle it down into one word that represents your group. Yeah? So you have approximately 120 seconds in this group to figure out what word your group is demanding in this moment. Like what's real for y'all. Make sense? Yeah. Type action. So you got about 30 seconds. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. So with the time you have left, you might want to think about if you're going to say it as a group or if one person is going to say it. It's up to y'all. Who says it? One person or a whole group? You have 10 seconds to figure that out. 10 seconds. When I say hey now, y'all say we want freedom, freedom. Hey now, we want freedom, freedom. One more time, hey now, we want freedom, freedom. Most steps. So thank y'all. Can you stop it up for yourselves? Doing that little weird thing real quick. There's one more step. One more step to this. This is a lot. I'm supposed to be talking, not y'all, but here we are. We're gonna go in this shape, in like a U. And I want it to kind of sound like a really rapid song. I know it's gonna be wonky because you're like waiting for the next group to go. But I want to hear your words and like nothing in between, just like the words getting all the way around to here. Cool? Does that make sense? So one group after the other is going to say their word, whether it's the whole group or that one person. Tight? All right, so we're gonna start to my left. Whenever you're ready.
Common ground.
Justice.
Hope.
Unity.
Peace.
Kindness.
Love.
Healing.
Love. Respect.
Guidance.
Tranquility.
Happiness. Respect.
Justice.
We start off with folks? Yes. Thank y'all. I'll explain like why I just did that thing in a second. But I want to introduce y'all to this thing of this performance. How many folks have been to a spoken word event before? Tight, it's like half the room. This is a reading, but I'm sorry. I can't resist. I can't help but do something when I say reading that way. But like this, feel free to make the noises, all of them. So like snaps, you know what I'm saying? Like damn. Like, can we do a collective damn if you curse? If not, it's fine. Can we say damn? Damn. Most def, like all of that. Ooh, If you want to stop all of that, like let the poems move you. I want to normalize that because I know, like, for me even, like when I go to readings, I'm a very, as you see, I'm a very interactive, and sometimes loud person, and sometimes at readings I feel really restricted. So I want to break that immediately. The noise we just made. So I'm going to read some poems from Conversion Theory, which I'll talk about in a second. But a little bit about me from Ohio. Shout out to Ohio. You know, happens in the room. Literally never happens. Never. But you always ask, you know, it does happen. And in college, I went to school in Michigan, and that's when I really came into who I am as a person, which is I accept that I'm a disruptor. And I've like just recently in the past 2 months accepted that title, even knowing what I've done. So like in college I got both radicalized and politicized, like what I believe and what I'm willing to do about what I believe. And that was always disruption. So I had a djembe drum. If there was a reason for me to break it out in the middle of a football game, in the middle of a board meeting, event, whatever, we was in that thing. And there was a lot of organizing around that. It wasn't just me randomly going around and disrupting things without purpose. So there was always pedagogy behind it. But I accepted that I was a noisemaker before I understood disruption. And so thank y'all for making the noise with me. What I've learned from organizing and from protesting, from disrupting, is that oppressive forces, more than going along with a thing, more than complicity, wants silence, right? And silence isn't always audible. Sometimes making noise isn't always audible. Sometimes making noise looks like distributing a thing. Sometimes making noise is physical, but it's a disruption of this thing. Because when there's noise happening, there's all these things that are going on. Like I can't force it to go how I want it to go, right? So these very strict structures have a hard time operating when there's a lot of noise happening. So thank y'all for doing that. Yeah, those are all the pre-things. So y'all hear some more poems? So this is my first book. Came out last year, and it was a product. I moved here in 2017, and I was sitting and thinking about how I would disrupt it, because like I said, I had an organizing community in the Midwest, and I moved out here and I had nothing. First of all, you're gonna move to a new place, no one told me this, I'm telling you now. Figure out how to make friends before you get there, make a plan, maybe a graph, an outline of sorts that you can follow, because that was the hardest thing for me moving. It was like, oh, word, okay, I have to start over. But like, not even start over, because I never had to make friends that way before you had school and work and all those things. So yeah, just so you know ahead of time if you're moving. Think about that. And so I was sitting alone trying to figure out like what it means or how I can disrupt, because it's in me, that's who I am. So I'm like, word, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not building a community with people, I'm not disrupting anything. What can I do? And I had to think about poetry for the first time with intent to disrupt. Like, what does it mean to write poems that are intended to disrupt something? And so I had you thinking about what you demand, because a lot of the organizing I did, it was like requiring something of folks. So it wasn't just like, stop this thing you're doing because it's wrong. It's like, word, here's this other route that you can go, right? And here's how you correct that ill that you were doing. And so this book is a list of demands, and each poem is a demand in exchange for that silence, right? And so I'm a noisemaker, and it sets up that the uprising that happened in Ferguson in 2014, if you're not familiar, you're familiar, that it never stopped. And it was like the noise kept coming, folks weren't negotiating, there was no conversation, it was just like it went back to back. And so finally, folks sat down and was like, word, what do you want? Like, what would it take, right? And I think, because that's also what happens when I don't know if any of y'all are engaged in disruption, but that's the first thing that happens. They try to bring you to a table and negotiate for this, whatever this thing is, hey, cut that shit out, all right? Because we need to get back to business as usual. And so this book imagines that conversation went our way. So it was like, we're tight, you want to bring us to the table? We've disrupted as much as we have decided we wanted to. Here's the things that we're going to need. And some of the things are like really practical, like no more dead black folks, no more cops. Those are just a few practical things. Some of them are more imaginary, like wings, another planet, right? And so it runs everything in between and beyond that. So I'm going to read poems now. This is the most talking I've ever done at a reading. So shout out to y'all. I feel really comfortable. Oh yes, my God, yes. This first poem I'm gonna read is, the demand is segregation, which is a controversial one. I did a reading and I was like, yeah, one of my professors in college told me that integration was the worst thing that happened to Southern black folks. Somebody was like, ooh, gasp, integration was amazing. Like with that coming together, there was a lot of clashing that happened, for lack of a better word. And yeah, so just imagine this demand is for that separation, which is more so an acknowledgement of these things that we are separate, that we didn't create, but it is like what we're dealing with. And so how can we come together with knowing that? That makes sense. So the epigraph is, you can't sit with us. For folks who don't know, because I had to look it up when I was writing a book, epigraph is the thing that goes before the poem. It's like written on the page. We raise the roof, they raise the rent. We Harlem shake, they shake down Harlem. We invent a dance called the whip. They pretend they don't know how anymore. African American proverb. Let the record clearly reflect that they is the polos wearing collared boys. They is the judge that passed the law to his son. They inherit stolen property, protected with everyone else's life. They destroy all the pretty to rebuild and call it theirs. They would burn the sun back if they could. They is the hand searching afros without a warrant. They is the manager that called me a monkey by the bananas without ever saying monkey. They take first, ask questions when found guilty. They innocent. They never in trial long enough to be proven anything else. They take liberty and justice from all. They write rules to a game and don't play by them. They immigrant passing for pilgrim. They intruder that changed the locks after breaking and entering. They stand on soil and demand it cave. They hollow a home and make a profit from the shell. They footprint and change the history of the land. They reassign the borders. They shake everything, but never at fault. They snatch a culture by the threads. They clothe a continent in denial. They is the reader questioning where they fit on this page. They might never find the answer in these words. They is the outsider in this story. We, inventors of magic before magic knew it had a name. We innovative enough to pull an entire language from muscle memory. We imagine a whole dictionary. We morph music into a dialect. We speak in code, bilingual in business settings. We bend to avoid breaking. We dance with the wind. We the howl in the mouth of a dark night. We punch lines into jokes. We laugh to keep from dying. We smile big to shrink in public. We the night sky and the stars that built it. We black hole and the first things to be swallowed. We tongue kiss a typhoon. We hardly get a break for air. We breathe and it sound like a hurricane. We heart quaking a pulse. We skin draped in catastrophe. We all that and the whole bag. We chip off the old block. We shoulder shrug and shift the weather. We got the short end of the stick, but still play that motherfucker like a whole drum set. We percuss as a first language. We construct joy from scratch. We color a constellation using our bare hands. We hold galaxy in our palms. We close hand into a fist, rearrange the revolution of the planets. We walk a tree trunk with an axe to grind. We grounded by nature. We pockets are steady getting stole from. Still, we generously give our lives for this world. Most times without choice. We here, living anyway, a half step away from soaring. So a thing I meant to say before I started that poem that I thought about after is that thinking about in the rest of the book, I wanted some context for the moments of we and the moments of they. Sort of a rubric or a table of contents for those words specifically. So if you ever forget as you're reading, like, where there's a we here, who's that we? Go reference that poem. The next poem, it's called Wings. Spine sprouts arms and the body doesn't call this a mutation. Back bends to the thought of extension. Chords harp vocals into morning dew. Fresh smell of something new brandishing. Hands feathered in fingers, spread in opposite cardinal directions. Bird floats from atop a flagpole during a pledge to investigate. Back on the soil, bone alchemizes a lighter skeleton for better travel. Weight, a myth we tell the kids to give them nightmares. Earth, a place we vacation. The ground, a distant cousin we only speak to in the fall. Branches budding from our shoulder blades. Feather stems stitched together with love notes. Bird chests burgeon so we don't choke on the way up. Talons creep out of the places we used to surrender with. We look more monster now than ever before. But weren't we always? At least now we can reap the benefits instead of meeting the reaper. Arms arched with new purpose. Hands up, how we prepare for departure now. Bullets fade to sparklers. Looks like the cop is throwing us a going away party. Fist fight escalated to a festival. Farewell to being foreign. Feathers falling all over. An oil spill of cloud dust in flight. Soak these new appendages the color of new heights. Arch upward the way our hands used to. When there was no such thing as escaping. Before our bodies gave birth to new appetites. And we never look back. This time we know exactly where we come from. Know exactly why we left. We're free. No asterisk. Nothing up there will ask us why we came. In fact, has been waiting for us to leave this place. And I told you so, exhales from a comet on our way out. We take everything with us, leaving the nothing this world is worth in exchange. Future is the only thing we haven't decided yet. We've decided to go exactly there. No tomorrow is not promised, but no tomorrow, anyone who wants to take it from us will have to catch us first. We're going face forward into the unknown, someplace, any place, but here. So I was telling some folks in the class earlier that I sweat a lot, and I have a towel. This is the towel. The aforementioned sweat towel. Where wrapped up? Oh, where? It was like, sorry, I didn't know if that was, okay. I want to do a thing. I want to kick it to y'all. Can someone say out a random number?
7.
12. That 12 was, you was holding that 12 for a minute. I was said 12. And that was it. Like, it was perfect. Amazing. And it's the actual page of the poem. This is the one I wasn't going to do. Look at God. So this poem is called Black House. Some context that you might need in Detroit. In Detroit and Ann Arbor, two places where there were black women that were victims of state-sanctioned violence at the hands of police. One named Ora Rosser, 2014. Another named Diana Stanley Jones. She was 8 during a police raid. And so their names come on. I just wanted you to have that reference just for this space. This poem is called Black House, Representation for Future Reference. The Gate, pending election results, put in her 2 weeks notice in November. January came around and wasn't nothing keeping us out. Instead of a fence, another boundary issued a different name. We adorn the ways we've come to love each other on the outside. Barbed wire is laced between every oil painting we've ever owned. All the clowns playing saxophones got the band back together. Moved the crew to 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. Feels like home, like we belong here. The front door is now a single entrance guarded by one large man. He is everyone's cousin, holding 2 sidekicks, all wearing sunglasses, checking IDs, but for passage, will accept the recitation of Lift Every Voice and Sing, in full without pausing, or mumbling, or leaning on your auntie's voice. Ladies are always free. Inauguration is a block party. It doesn't really matter who the president is or whose name is on the lease, because if the cops come knocking, we will have already moved the party halfway around the world. Food prepared by the holiest of hands. Happiness home cooked and heavy. Hymns bumping bass so disruptive, a stick of dynamite files a noise complaint. Front lawn strewn with iced tea cans and Skittles. Looks like a tribute of some kind. Except Trayvon is here too. Rode in the back seat behind Mike. Rakia picked them up after Sandra decided to walk. They're not late because there was no start time. Ayana laughs and a bouquet sprouts in her tongue. Aura picks the smallest flower, plants a whole garden in her own throat. On their way past the graveyard, none of them blink or hold their breath, don't even know what a graveyard looks like, because on this day we have never died, or had to witness our own closing scene, or had to play the villain after the victim. Today, we take the fight to the hand that deprives us. Instead of pounding the pavement, we bust down the country's door. In place of a seat at the table, we demolish the whole house, distribute the scraps as party favors, grow a neighborhood with no white anywhere near the things with roots. We know this is only temporary though. Night is peeking through the hole in the ozone, sees us having a good old time, waiting to have its way with us. The blackest thing we can do is to beat the sun home. Tomorrow will return us to dusk anyway. Just before the light issues its last call, we gather for a family photo, so our children will picture themselves here too. Someone slides in the group chat. They don't know it, but we're doing the same thing again tomorrow. The house really is a home. Luther signed it over to all of us in his will. So we'll do 2 more poems. Sorry, 2 more poems. How y'all feeling?
Yeah, good.
There we go. That's what we like to hear. So this demand is no more lists. And no more counting. And no more numbered days. And no more protest. And no more mourning. And no more suns falling before their time. And no more stars casting shadows. And no more reason to get nervous at a traffic stop. And no more traffic stop. And no more cliffhangers. And no more stories left unwritten. And no more ghostwriters. And no more pigeonholing futures. And no more skin-affiliated forms of success. And no more would have. And another thing. And another thing after that. And however many more things we decide we deserve. And tongue that gets tired of introductions in past tense. And past tense that refuses to show up to dinner unannounced. And families who don't know any ghosts on a first name basis. And first names that never go out of style. And never find hashtags fashionable. And fashion that don't get you dead. And eyes without weapons. And looks that can't kill. And no more poems about Black Death. So, yeah. Can we all take a breath together? Yeah. I was telling a friend over the summer that we didn't take breaths, and I know in California it may be different, but in the Midwest we didn't take breaths. We weren't allowed to drink water in class. Like they really didn't want us to survive out here. And it's really wild. I don't know how it was legal. But yeah, so breath always. One more poem. Can we say "Aww"? Yeah, that's cool. I haven't been dancing up here, but I am a dancer. Are there any dancers in the room? Shout out to you in the back. There's like 5 people. When I say dancer, I mean you derive joy from moving your body, no matter what it looks like. So I'm asking again, any dancers in the room? Most deaf. Always gotta clarify. And so this last poem is also in the book. All the poems I've done here are in the book. Oh, the book! The book is in the back. On the book. That's all. It's about movement and stillness, like what it, for me as a Black boy, with those two things being next to each other. It's that. Thank y'all so much for having me. In the 6th grade, I had the cleanest moonwalk in the entire state of Ohio. At the end of the year talent show, I slid back so smooth, they say I actually reversed time, and they had to start the whole show over again. One day, while perfecting my shoeless glide across smooth surfaces in our kitchen, I nearly knocked the glass off the table. My father said it was time I start minding my step. He said, a dancer must always consider the consequences of his movements. 3 years later, I'm 14, alone, and walking to the gas station. Headphones in, hood up, must have been leaning like some sort of smooth criminal, because here come this cop, straight out of thin air. Stopped me dead in my two-step. Told me I didn't belong in the neighborhood I grew up in. Called me a word that was not my name. Told me to go back where I came from. And I felt my blood boiling into lava. My tongue melting like plastic onto my gums. My fists curled tight and squeezing the burning air in front of me. But I remained still. No matter how hot I was, I knew the consequences of not keeping my hands frozen. I was stuck, standing on the side of the road, imagining all the other Black boys who have had to learn the choreography of a traffic stop. Those who made all the moves they were taught and still got beat, and all the Black boys lying still in a grave made of their father's warnings. And I thought, when a perfectly logical move or look or following orders could lead to you never dancing again, then there is no right way to avoid the casket. So I might as well move as much as I possibly can while I'm here. Don't ask me why I'm always dancing. Ask what kind of country convinces its people that they're safest when stiff. I dance because I stopped moving once in order to survive, and my body still hasn't forgiven me. I dance because I feel like it. Because outside of my middle name, dancing is the only gift from my father that I haven't sold to pay rent. I dance because sometimes it just feels good to sweat. Having all this sweat pouring from my body and not a tear in sight. Ever so often, I have flashbacks to moonwalking at the 6th grade talent shows. A time before I understood the gravity of being black and in motion. When the bass on a dance floor reaches both hands inside my chest and remixes my pulse, I forget this country wants me lifeless. Or the music is all the excuse I need not to care. For a few minutes at a time, it feels like I'm actually walking on the moon and never coming back. Thank you.
One more time for Darius Simpson. Awesome. So now we have the pleasure of speaking to both Naomi and Darius in conversation. We have a couple of questions. We really want to hear from you all, maybe the questions or comments you all have when it comes to writing and social action and what that looks like. Before that happens, if you enjoyed Darius and you are interested in the way that he was up here doing spoken word or moving his body or including movement into poems or going from page to stage, I am teaching a class next semester called Page to Stage. It's like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send around some flyers. Students, if you're interested, take a flyer and then look for the class. I think classes go live next week, so be on the lookout for that. And one more thing one more plug. There's also an event next week. Fong, you want to say anything about it? No? All right. It's Confessions of a Radical Chicano Doo-Wop Singer, and it's taking place Wednesday, October 9th, from 6 to 8 in Library Room 1180. So it should be a pretty dope event. So if you're interested in that, I'll send that around as well. Only have one copy, so keep it cool. So we have a few questions, and then we'll open it up for you all to ask some questions too.
My first question is for Naomi. Thanks again for your beautiful reading. You talk in the novel Island of a Thousand Mirrors about ideas of colorism, a certain color complex, and beauty values that exist in Sri Lanka. I wonder if you could explain to us a little bit about that, and then from your experience as a U.S. resident and as an Oaklander, how does that color complex in Sri Lanka compare to what you've seen in African American communities?
Okay. I mean, the issue of colorism is not just Sri Lankan or American. It is like a global issue, right? Like, I think people that have had any interaction with other parts of the world, it's just everywhere. So in South Asia being India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and I'm forgetting a country, but South Asia. Colorism is a really huge problem, especially for young women. There is this incredible pressure to be as light-skinned as possible. Light-skinned girls and women are considered much more valuable. It's easier to get married. It's just a horrible, horrible problem. And there's a lot of like skin whitening products. You guys know about Fair and Lovely? Yeah, Fair and Lovely, right? Like it's this bleaching cream that you can buy, or you can go to the salon. You can go to the salon. Oh, it's fun. You can go to the salon and have this stuff put on your face, and it bleaches your skin. And it's everywhere. I was just in like San Jose in an Indian shop, and they had Fair and Lovely on the shelf. And I'm like, oh, of course it's here too. And I don't know where it's coming from. It's so entrenched in the culture. I want to blame colonization, right? Because we were colonized for 300 years. But I don't know. I think it's pernicious. I think it's across the board. I actually grew up in Nigeria, and even Africa, even Africa, which is like so ridiculous, but like there's parts of Africa where skin bleaching is like a huge problem, and it's like really normalized. So, and then here, I mean, God, I don't know, like, it's just shitty. I don't know what to say, except it's a horrible, stupid thing. My own experience, again, to take it out of America into Sri Lanka, when I was in Sri Lanka, I was gonna be, when I'm married for the second time, but during my first wedding, I was marrying a Sri Lankan guy, and there was all this pressure to get bleached. There was so much pressure to get bleached, and I was like, I'm not doing it. And people really were upset that I didn't do it, you know? And I was much younger, so I went to the makeup artist, and then there was this like layer of makeup that was put on because my skin color was not okay. Another story I had, and then maybe like 15 years later, when my first book came out in Sri Lanka, it also came out in India, and it was a really big deal. And I was in a photo shoot for Vogue India, which was very fun and very glamorous and really exciting. And when the pictures came out, the photo shoot was me, an Indian writer, and a British writer. And when the pictures came out, like we were all the color of the British writer. So yeah, it just photoshopped everyone. And then this Vogue India is like this thick, and I was looking through page after page, and it's just every picture is photoshopped, light skin. So, you know, it's horrible. What? Yeah. So that, I mean, I think it's just across the board, and it's really sad. Yeah.
Thanks, Naomi. So the next question is for the both of you. Also, feel free to chime in. So one of my favorite quotes is a Nina Simone quote, and she says in an interview, the duty of an artist is to reflect the times. And she says that's true of painters, sculptors, musicians, etc., across all, you know, all the kind of art platforms there are. And so, so Naomi, I was reading an interview, and one of the things you said in the interview is, I think it's the writer's particular job to break these silences, to try and articulate what is difficult to articulate. And Darius, I know you're an avid believer in poetry as a tool to kind of fight oppression and social justice. So my question is, what is the role of a writer when it comes to social justice or activism, or as like Nina Simone's words, reflecting the times? Does the writer even have an obligation to reflect the times?
I think the writer's, whittled down to the core, the writer's responsibility is to tell the truth, and not like some sort of altered truth of self and like a bias, but to actually tell the truth. And I think that involves reflecting the times, but I also think, I think it's so much more than that. I think part of the job is to take a hard look at the times from a historical perspective as well. So it's like, right now, but also what does this look like, and the imagination aspect of it. So like that future is a huge part of it. So reflecting the times, but also reflecting the past, reflecting the future, and creating and altering like what that can look like. So yes, short answer, I think that's a job, but there are a bunch of jobs of the artists. Because I think each writer also takes on their own task, like takes on their own part of that, because we can't all be encompassing all these things. So the writer kind of gets to decide, but also through life experience and who they are when they come into this world, it's decided their role is in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of the most important jobs. It's like when I'm writing a book, I don't think about, I need to sort of talk about this social justice thing. Like, I'm following a character, but my characters are almost always people of color. I'm writing a white man right now. It's very interesting. It's going well, I think. But they're always informed, as you said, by history, right? So a book is going to be something that obsesses me. I have to spend a lot of time with these characters. I have to be working with them for years and years, like sometimes a decade after the first book. So these questions are like deep, layered questions. And often that's about, what I'm really writing about is trauma. Like all my books are about trauma, like the ways in which traumatized people extend that trauma onto the next generation, and how we hurt. Really, if you really want to boil it down, it's that very overused thing of hurt people. That's really the essence of what I'm doing. And the way that is enacted is often through misogyny or racism, right? These are old wounds that we're carrying, and we then enact them onto others, and the cycle sort of continues. So I think the job of the writer is to be like, to point it out and say, here it is, what are you as a reader, like it's a mirror for the reader. The reader should be reading and being like, oh, how do I fit in? Like, where is my trajectory intersecting with the trajectory of these characters that hopefully I care about? So my job is to make you care about certain people that you have no, like experience being, you're not living in their skin, but I want you to live in their skin for a while.
Awesome, thank you both. So I want to open it up to just a few questions. We only have time for maybe like two or three questions from the audience. So if you have a question, these are wired mics, so I can't bring you the mic, so you have to stand up and kind of project. So again, just maybe a few. Dr. Stromberg, yeah?
I'm just curious, based on what Naomi was saying, and this is for Darius or Naomi, but you talked about writing about trauma, and my students are here and want teaching about trauma. I wondered either when you could speak about the role of literature or poetry in the healing as for trauma. If either of you would care to speak to that.
We were actually talking about this in class earlier. The question came up about like what healing has looked like for me personally. I think there was someone that spoke about the distance they needed in something that they were writing about, a trauma that they had put to the page, and it was there are a bunch of different ways to engage with trauma through writing. My specific healing has looked like there was a friend who passed away, and I wrote a poem like immediately when I got the news. And that poem, it wasn't planned to be, but it became this cathartic experience of me reciting the poem when I was walking down the street or standing at work because I wanted to have him with me. And so it became a way for me to carry this person I wasn't ready to let go because it was so sudden. So it became a process of me deciding how I get to let go of this person and reclaiming that experience and that grief. So I think it can look a million different ways. And it's all about like the person. I think the beautiful thing about writing is you get to decide how close or far you want to be in the writing of it, and like the reciting of it, yes, but also in like what you're actually putting down. Like where's this trauma located? You get to imagine. A huge part of reflecting the times, that imagination and the hope for like what does this thing look like? What can it look like? And so like the same thing with the trauma. It's like where this is what happened. This is the truth telling. And as a writer, what am I doing with that? Like what would be healing for me to do with this thing?
They've done all these studies about how writing actually helps you heal. I'm sure you're teaching about that, but they say that if you have folks that have gone through surgery or something, and you make them write about whatever they want 3 times a week or less, they actually heal quicker. So there are literal studies that say writing helps our bodies heal. Wow, right? Like, wow. So there are all these ways in which I think it's not just writing, it's song, it's dancing, it's movement, it's all the arts, painting, all of these things are like deeply, deeply healing for us. Personally, the books are obsessions, and I think that what I'm working out some kind of issue of my own through the work, and then like the first book is like about the war in Sri Lanka, and I was so deeply entrenched in that, and then once the book was done, I'm somewhat I kind of know what's going on in Sri Lanka, but I'm not in the same way obsessed. The second book is about maternity and like what happens when a young woman is traumatized, like what happens to her maternity. And I was really, I'm not a mother myself by choice, and I was really interested and obsessed with maternity, so I had to work that out on the page, and now it's gone. So I feel like those early traumas or whatever are sort of worked out. And then also, I don't know, like, go to therapy also, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, don't just sit there and write, because there's also ways in which writing can maybe be traumatic. I don't know. I just said that, and that's crazy. So, it can be a dangerous thing. It can be a dangerous thing, right? Talking about trauma, because I don't know what people's traumas are, so I don't know how different people are attacking that or dealing with it. But I would say just there's so many things that you can do, and hopefully the sort of important thing is that you get some kind of healing, whatever it is.
Two more questions.
For me, the term community is something that I'm very much fascinated with. For some people, it's something they're always searching for. For other people, community is something they're wanting to move away from. Audre Lorde has this great quote about community, that without community, there is no liberation. So for both of you, what does community mean to you, both as an artist and as a person?
Community, yeah, that is so he's asking a question about community and how important it is and what it is. No, that's okay. You know, it's really interesting because like when I was 3 years old, we left Sri Lanka and we moved to Nigeria. And then from Nigeria, when I was 12, we moved to Los Angeles. So I grew up in an immigrant Sri Lankan community in LA. But, you know, from the book, you learned about a little bit about the Civil War. So I'm Sinhalese. I'm from the majority ethnicity. And the community that I grew up in, you know, I always rebelled against it because it was supposed to be everything. Like we were really deeply entrenched in it. And I really rebelled against it because I felt it was like horrible and racist. And I don't know if immigrants are supposed to talk about their own communities in this way, right? But for me, it was like very sexist, and there were like all these rules that I didn't want to follow. And there was also a ton of money going back to Sri Lanka to fight against like, the Tamil cause, right? So for me, community in those early days was like a really triggering thing that I didn't like. But the way that I then found community was like through the writers. So now I'm part of a community of Sri Lankan writers. So the re-entry into Sri Lanka through being in contact with writers and journalists is extremely powerful. So that's how I like found my way back into Sri Lanka, is like that community of people that are doing incredible work, like war reporting, reporting from the north of Sri Lanka, reporting from militarized zones. Those folks that are like actual activists and doing very, very like life-saving work, that's my community in Sri Lanka. And here, I think my greatest community is other writers, because no one gets you're crazy like another writer.
Yeah, I think for me, community means or is a commitment to get and stay next to each other. And I think, yeah, what Audrey was calling on is like, it's impossible to organize with folks if you're not with folks. And organizing is the only way to, yeah. As a person, as an artist, I think how I separate what community looks like. As a person, I think my community is based on who I am. And as an artist, I think it's more based on who I want to be. And like an intentional way for us to grow and progress as a crew. I actually get really frustrated when I'm amongst artist groups that aren't doing the work of reflection and being critical of each other, which is similar about who I am as a person, but I'm a little less rigid in that way. I think, yeah, the folks that I surround myself with outside of artist communities, first of all, my closest friends are artists, so there's some overlap. But yeah, I think it reflects who I am, and not just like my personality in this moment, but like in a deep way, who I am as a human being. And I think my community reflects that versus, yeah, what I said already about that.
Thanks. One more quick question, preferably from a student, because we heard from two professors. Any student got a question that they're burning to ask? Yes, in the back, in the LA Dodgers.
This one's for Mr. Simpson. How did, like, you used the word disruptor. I just want to know, like, because you said during your college years, like, that's like when you kind of got polarized and politicized, right? How did you know that you were a disruptor, like, when you went through that? Like, how did you, like, embody that and, like, do what you do now?
Word. It happened. It got to a point, so the breaking point, there was, when Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson, the black leaders, and leader is a really weird word, hence the quotes, because, yeah. But the folks who were seen as leaders because they held positions of power or notoriety on the campus, they got together. And like the second person that spoke at this little brainstorming of what we were gonna do as black folks on this campus, they said it wasn't about race. And I was like, excuse me? And so for the first time I had to, I broke away. And it was like, I had to figure out what's real for me, and I had to reflect on like what I needed and like what I actually wanted to do versus being able to go along with what this group who I love dearly and in community with, like I couldn't rely on what they wanted to do anymore. So I had to ask a question. It's like, what do you want to do? And it was a continual asking of like what I wanted and what I needed, like what was I feeling and how to address that feeling, how to let out that anger. What was I? It was a bunch of questions, thinking questions, so I could go on the list. But it came from a question and having to question. So not just like casual questioning myself, but I actually had to. It was a need because it was a feeling I couldn't shake. And what that looked like was going to things alone sometimes. It looked like being targeted for much of my college career. It looked like losing a year and staying there longer because of sanctions from university. But at every moment, I get chills thinking about it because I can look back and say I did what I needed to do, and I don't regret it. My only regret is not doing it louder. And it was like, it looked like, we can talk more about like what the specifics is like. I'm gonna say them on the mic and give folks ideas what to do. But it was rough. But it was also extremely liberating because I wasn't relying on someone else to fill my need. It was like, word, these are the things, and like I got to talk to other folks that had a similar need, and we got together and we got to do the things. And to this day, there are folks that are like, yo, that was a horrible decision. But again, like I said, I can look back and say that I did what I needed to do, what I felt like was right and necessary, and I have no regrets.
So good it one more time, please, for Nayomi Munaweera.